Stop driving and start discovering. We just launched the History or Drive app. It turns your phone into a professional tour guide with over 500 historic locations. Want to go where we've gone? Access expert videos and podcasts that sync with your route. With one-click directions, history is just a turn away. Grab our launch pass for just $2.50. That's full access through the end of 2026 for less than a cup of coffee. Visit historyordrive.com today and start your next history road trip. That's historyordrive.com. Imagine it's 1912, and you were standing next to the sheer, towering scale of the RMS Titanic. It sits docked in Southampton. It's a floating palace of iron and luxury, a testament to human ingenuity that the world proudly declares unsinkable. The air is filled with cheers of thousands, the scent of fresh lacquer, and the boundless optimism of a new century. But 4 days later, in the freezing, starlit darkness of the North Atlantic, that optimism shatters. A sudden scrape against ice, a frantic rush of black water into the hull, and within hours, the grandest ship in the world is gone. It became one of the deadliest peacetime maritime disasters in history, claiming the lives of over 1,500 souls. It was a tragedy that didn't just end lives, it permanently altered our relationship with progress, safety, and the sea. Welcome to Talk with History. One filmmaker, one historian, leading history-inspired world travels. For the curious, the history lovers, and the explorer in us all. I am your host, Scott, here with my wife and historian, Jenn.
Hello.
Today, we aren't just talking about the history books. We're bringing you along on our visit to the Traveling Titanic Exhibition. Jenn and I are diving deep into what it's like to stand inches away from actual items of the ship recovered from 2.5 miles beneath the ocean. We'll talk about the haunting experience of watching a detailed recreation of the sinking of the ship, and how this traveling exhibit beautifully connects us to the raw human stories behind the tragedy. Today we are stepping onto the deck of history's most famous shipwreck. All right, Jenn. You, when you were in college, saw this movie 10 times in the theater. I learned this very early on in our relationship. You told me your brother had to carry you out of the theater sobbing, I think the first time or the second time you saw it.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever cried hysterically at a movie. It was the Titanic. It probably was the only time I've ever done this to this degree, because I've cried at other movies, but to the fact I couldn't even get up out of the seat. And my brother had to kind of lift me up, walk me to the car. I remember he put me in the car, put my seatbelt on, and shut the door. I was so hysterical at the end of the movie.
Yeah. So I lead with that because Jenn loves all things Titanic. We actually have another video on the Titanic Memorial outside of Washington, D.C. So I'll link that in the show notes if you guys want to see that. It's kind of an interesting piece of Titanic history.
Yeah. And we visit some Titanic victims in their burial places. One is in Buffalo, Richmond, and Buffalo, New York.
Yep.
We always seem to find them, and I want to pay my respects. So it's just something that's fascinated me since I was a kid.
Yeah. Right. Now, I say all of that to kind of let our audience know how much Jenn enjoys this topic. But what interesting fact, when you were up in Baltimore with American Cruise Lines, you're out there kind of seeing the history sites. And I don't think you expected to find this traveling Titanic experience exhibit. This is kind of one of those traveling exhibits that travels, it moves it around the country. And I will put a link in the show notes to see if it's coming to a city close to you. So if this interests you, take a look at the podcast show notes, the video show notes, and I'll put the link to this specific exhibit, this traveling exhibit, and you can see if it's going to be anywhere close to you. But tell us about this exhibit.
It's unlike anything I've ever done before. It's one of those immersive experiences. And what I mean by that is I've seen Titanic exhibits before in Las Vegas and things like that, where they have a lot of the artifacts.
Like a more museum style.
Yes, and you get a character before you walk in, you see if you survive. This was much more, you were on the ship and you got to see the grand staircase and you got to stand there and you got to see the water rushing towards you. But the most amazing one is where you got to sit in a lifeboat in a dark room and watch the ship as it slowly, the lights went out.
And they let you film, like you asked.
Yes.
They let you film the whole thing. So I was very surprised by that, because a lot of times exhibits like this they'll kind of be against that. They'll say, hey, you can take pictures, but no video. But they let you film the whole thing. So there's some really cool shots that you got in the video, which again will be linked in the show notes of the podcast. And I'll show it on the video one of this kind of. It's neat because you're from behind, so you can see the rest of the people in this exhibit sitting in a lifeboat. It looks like they're in a lifeboat in the water looking at the Titanic off in the distance because it's dark room. So it was really neat.
It was neat. It was cold in there, like it would have been that night.
Yeah.
And you see the ship rise up and you see it break in two and then you see how fast it sank. You're kind of there for its last moments. And it was really immersive. Plus, they also have a VR option where you can put the VR headset on and basically walk around the Titanic.
Oh, wow. So like you can put the goggles on and you can actually, that's cool.
And I didn't do that part because I couldn't actually like film that, but it's also part of the immersive experience if you'd like to do it. So it was just, I never get bored with learning about it. I never get bored with finding out things and going there and seeing it. So for me, it was one of those moments that I know a lot about it. So I got to see a recreation of where the telegraph operators worked and them setting out CQD when no one really knows what that means, and how the Titanic brings about all of these rules in maritime safety, which we as sailors know now and we take them as law. But at that time in 1912, these weren't established yet.
So tell me about the CQD. So folks may not know that SOS has not always been a universal cry for help.
Yes. So CQD was their cry for help, but because it's not universal at the time, and some people don't know what that means. And when you say, what do you mean, Jen? They don't know what that means. Nowadays, we all pretty much speak English on the maritime.
Yeah. Yeah. If folks don't know, right, when we do a deployment, and it's been some time, but even when I did a deployment over the Arabian Gulf, right, on my first and second ship, when you're traveling, typically, right, the Navy ships are some of the larger ships out there, unless you're going by a merchant ship. But everybody on the open seas, 99% of the time, speaks basic English. So if we're calling out our position or we're querying a ship, or we're kind of stating our intentions, we're stating it in English. And basically everybody on the open ocean speaks enough English or has someone that speaks English so they can communicate.
Yes. At that time, that really wasn't quite done yet.
Yeah, not in 1912.
And so the standard distress call for British ships that were equipped with this wireless system, it was first introduced in 1904. It combined the telegraph code CQ, which means attention all stations, with D, distress. So it translates to all stations distress. And this is right when SOS is coming into international use. And so it's not recognized globally yet. And that's why they alternate between the two. They use CQD and they use SOS, but at the time people were like, only British ships are going to know what CQD means, and SOS is still not picked up by everyone internationally. So the Titanic is in the perfect spot for just a maritime disaster, which is what happens because the comms have not been standardized. And so that's what happens. And I show you the desk and how low the desk was to the ground because the men were in a smaller room. But if you know anything about the Titanic and those men, they stay there to the very last moment, getting those distress calls out. And they do survive and they're able to give testimony later on. But the other ships in the area who hear some of these things, again, the Titanic, this is major news. This ship is on its maiden voyage. The name alone is Greek mythology for the Titans. Like it is a ship of dreams. No one's imagining that they're having any issues 4 days into their maiden voyage. They think it's something with their
they're celebrating.
They're celebrating. They're having a good time. They're letting off fireworks. Like they don't realize that this ship is sinking. It's just kind of like an unfathomable thing to imagine. So the other ships in the area don't pay attention and don't listen. And as we know, RMS Titanic, Royal Mail Ship is what that means. The British used RMS for Royal Mail, like the mail ship, for any ship that's carrying mail on it. And so that's why the Titanic is the RMS Titanic. It sinks April 15th, 1912, hits an iceberg. There's about 2,200 passengers on board, and about 1,500 of them will die. And like you said, it's one of the deadliest peacetime disasters. They find that the lifeboats, what they don't have for everyone on board, are only filled to an average capacity of 60%.
Oh, I don't think I knew that.
And then when the people go into the water, the lifeboats don't go back to get them because they're afraid or concerned that people will swarm the lifeboats and pull them down, when really nobody barely had that kind of muscle. If they're in their clothes and
ice cold water.
Right.
It's so the interesting thing about this exhibit, right? Again, I encourage you folks to go watch the video. If you're listening, again, the link to the video is in the podcast show notes. But you're walking through, so it's kind of walking you through like some of the engineering spaces, and then you get to see different artifacts. Some are actually from the movie, right? You actually saw a life vest that was worn by, I think, Kate Winslet, right, in the movie. So you show a life vest, but there's other artifacts that are actually from the Titanic. There was a deck chair that you showed on there, full size deck chair. And I was kind of surprised to see that. And there's other little things that you show throughout. Yeah,
so that was neat. Like they had I think it was Ismay's book or prayer hymnal.
The guy who built the Titanic.
Mm-hmm. He's the one of the chairmen, the financier, J.P. Morgan. And there was a lot of famous people on there. So they have a couple things like postcard, picture cards, artifacts. And you can go places and see artifacts that they have taken from the bottom of the ocean floor. But what they have that I, was so amazed by was just the recreation of everything. And you can stand on the bridge and look through the windows and see what that looked like through the windows for the captain and for the people on board. You can stand on the bow and put your arms out like you're flying.
Yeah, like in the movie.
Like in the movie, which was really fun. They have one of 7 full deck chairs that exist. And so it's neat to see that artifact, which you don't get to see very often. But the biggest thing for me was you get to walk into the spaces. You get to walk into the dining rooms. You get to see what the silverware looked like set out. You get to see what the menus were. You get to see the tiles that were in the pool. And then you get to walk into those exercise spaces and what they look like. No photographs exist of the pool. So they just kind of recreated for you for what it looked like. It was just amazing to be immersed in Titanic. I've never had that kind of experience before. And like I said, when you go into the room with the lifeboats and the sinking, it's cold. Like you would be on the lifeboat cold and huddled up and watching this happen. So for me, it really was exciting. And I never get bored or tired of doing anything Titanic because that movie, like you said, meant so much to me. And the story means so much to me. And we always talk about women and children first. And you have these of the first class, the second class, the third class, the steerage, very much class oriented on this ship. And because of the chivalry of the men, more women and children survive of every class than the men. And that's what that monument is to in Washington, D.C. It's to the men of the Titanic who did their role in not getting on the lifeboats and allowing women and children to go. The lifeboats could have held about 1,100 people, roughly half the passengers on board. And but again, only about 700 survive because they don't fill the lifeboats to capacity. But you still have a higher percentage of women and children surviving than men because they adhered to that maritime. It's not even a rule. It's just.
It's kind of I would say it's like one of those unwritten rules, right? It's like, men opening the door for women, right? It's one of those kind of things, the societal expectation. I don't know.
It's just very chivalrous.
Yeah.
And I don't know if America or the world has gone more towards that or away from that, but it's just still, when I think of those men, and for me, it had different meaning because our oldest is 15 years old and he's a boy. And at that age, they said on the Titanic, they would have considered him a man. And they would not have allowed him on a lifeboat. And I thought to myself, wow, there were a lot of women who stayed behind with their children if they couldn't get on a lifeboat or if their husbands couldn't get on. And I thought this would be one of those moments for me. If my son couldn't get on board the Titanic, we'd be taking down those doors and those bed frames and flinging them into the water. And I'd be doing a full Kate Winslet and getting on one side of the bed. But it just is amazing. I still think about this, the class system that was so prevalent then and the men who stayed behind so women and children could be saved. Another place we visited on the channel is Molly Brown's house. And you think of the unsinkable Molly Brown in Denver, Colorado. Her home is there. And we tell her story. She was one of the women on the lifeboats who help with the people on there and keeping morale up before they are rescued. But as you know, the subsequent trials that happen after this, and then most of the victims are buried in Canada, where most of the bodies would wash ashore or the boats could get easier access to them. And that's where the big museums are. This is where James Cameron did a lot of his research. But if you really want to be immersed in what it looked like and felt like and stand there at the end of the grand staircase and for me, sit in a lifeboat, it really was, I really loved it. And if it visits you, if you want to be a part of that, if Titanic means as much to you as it does to me, I don't know why we're still fascinated with this ship 115 years later, but we are, and it was super fun.
If the Traveling Titanic Exhibition comes to a city near you, it's an absolute must visit. It isn't just a museum display, it's an emotional landscape that forces you to ask yourself how you would respond in the face of the ultimate test. It honors the dead by keeping their memories alive, ensuring their names are spoken and their stories are remembered. We'll talk to you next time. This has been a Walk with History production. Talk with History is created and hosted by me, Scott Benny. Episode researched by Jennifer Benny. Check out the show notes for links and references mentioned in this episode. Talk with History is supported by our community at thehistoryroadtrip.com. Make sure you hit that follow button in that podcast player, and we'll talk to you next time.